I go for a 5-star weapon, and then after that, start going for Farina cons, because Farina cons just buff them so much. Like, it's not just about Farina doing damage. She does so much extra buffing. So for a lot of these characters that don't have that good of vertical investment options, going for Farina is going to be a really good idea. Next here, we have Nilou. This is definitely a weapon. Easy choice. Her weapon is so good for her in particular. It's transferable to Farina as well, but really, her weapon is so good for her. For Raiden, obviously, you all know her C2 is where it's at. I highly recommend getting at least one copy of Chevreuse. It was really nice on that last banner that you're able to go for both Chevreuse C6 and Raiden C2. I think her weapon is like okay, but it's like good for drip and good for Bennettless teams. So if you're running Chevreuse without Bennett, then, which I've been liking more and more actually, then her weapon can be a better choice, but overall it's definitely C2 clears. The other thing I wanted to mention is that you don't want to wish for a weapon that's not on a good weapon banner, and you ideally don't want to wish for constellations when there's not good 4-stars on the banner, but that's sort of hard to gauge. You need to keep up with my banner reviews for that one. Ayaka, another character that definitely goes into the weapon category. Mistsplitter. It was a 30% increase over Aminoma, but nowadays with the new Fontaine craft rule, it's a smaller increase, but still the best increase overall. Her cons don't really get good until C4, and I'm not considering those for this list. Zhongli. This is a character that you just don't want to vertically invest into. Like, sure, you could get him Staff of Homa for his personal damage, but it's like that's kind of what I'd recommend if you want to do personal damage. Zhongli for his meteor. Physical Zhongli doesn't need any constellation, so in general, it's like just better if you want to buff Zhongli's damage. Like, just getting a bigger Farina to buff him more is probably just the better way to go. That's kind of tough. Like, yeah, you want to go for Homa if you want to max him out. It's tough. I guess we'll put it up here. Your Zhongli main, do damage with Homa. Go big Zhongli main. Kazuha. I think his C2 is definitely where it's at. The weapon's decent, but you need such good artifacts to really make use of it, whereas C2 just works. And it's not like good in all teams. Like Novelette teams, it's not so good in. Linny teams, it's not so good in. But in a lot of teams, it really is quite useful. So, and I mean, at worst, it increases his damage bonus because it gives him elemental mastery. So it's still good. Hu Tao. I think that you could go for C1 or weapon with Hu Tao. Both are very good choices. If you play with Shan Yun for plunge, then I definitely recommend going for the 5-star weapon. But the C1 is nice for versatility overall. I would definitely go weapon first, then C1. But if you go for the C1, it's a fun playstyle, so it's still worth it. For Jean, like you can't choose. It's for standard banner 5-stars. Maybe we won't cover them because it's like you can't really choose how you invest in them. It's like get them a 5-star weapon. That's basically it. For Venti, definitely get him Elegy, right? That's going to allow him to buff the team the most. His constellations really do absolutely nothing. They've got some of the worst constellations in the game, so definitely there. For Klee, she's like, if you get her Kagura as Verity, that's really useful. I would say C2. C2 is also really good though. It gives her energy refund. It's almost like Raiden C2. Like it's still really good for her. It's almost like C2 or weapon because I have C1 or C2 or weapon. But getting her Kaguras is really good. I would say it's better to get her a weapon because you can always use Kaguras on another team. But C2 Klee can kind of do some supporting stuff, or is it C4? That's only the support. If Jamie ends up watching the video, let me know if you recommend weapon or C2 or either one. I think I'm gonna hedge my bet and do C2 or weapon. Yeah, we'll do C2 or weapon for Klee. Albedo. If you don't have the Cinnabar Spindle, there's not much you can do. You can just hope and pray that in the future there's a character that has a 5-star weapon that matches him. But if you do have Cinnabar Spindle, then you don't even want anything. So it's like I would just go for other characters that can buff him, that can buff more. I'm gonna put him here because I really don't think that his vertical investment, like his constellations, are not good. If you want his teams to do more, it's just invest into other characters. I think is really your only way. That's tough. Albedo's a tough one. For Ganyu, she's got pretty decent 5-star weapons. She's got pretty decent constellations. I think 5-star weapon is the way to go. Doesn't have to be Amos bow. Like getting Aqua or getting Linny's bow are probably better choices than getting her signature because it's only good for her. Like if you haven't had it for the center banner, then great. Thanks, Faithy. Oh, I'm almost done, Faithy. I'll be there in 5 minutes. Yeah, I think going for Ganyu constellations is not awful. Like her constellations are decent, but I think the 5-star weapon is definitely the better choice, especially since it's more flexible. And then you can look at her constellations after that. For Ito, definitely his weapon. Getting Redhorn is huge. If you don't have C6 Goro, then continuing to pull on the Ito banner and maybe getting C6 Goro is the better choice. But definitely his weapon gives him a huge increase. For Shenhe, I think that C1 is the way to go. I got a weapon because drip, but I think that C1 is the better choice. She's also a character that kind of wants that C1, like kind of like Yolande, she wants her C1 to make her weapon really sing because she needs lots of ER. And Fav is just so good, like using Fav to batter your team, losing that kind of hurts. So I would definitely tend towards C1 over her weapon. For Yai, I also think that her weapon is the better one. Like her burst being more useful at C1 is nice, and C2 is a nice damage increase, but weapon overall is just going to be a better choice. Again, for all these weapons, just make sure it's a good weapon banner before you whiff. For Ayato, I hate that his C1 only affects opponents that are less than 50%, and giving the HP bonus at C1 or C2 is nice, but I would just go for a weapon, and I'd go for the Jade Cutter, to be honest, over his signature, even though the signature is good. Just whichever one's on a better weapon banner. If his signature's on a good weapon banner, great. If the Jade Cutter's on a weapon banner, great. Both are really close. Even Mistsplitter's close. So yeah, but weapon over constellations for Ayato. He's not got my favorite constellations, at least the early ones. Sino, I think weapon as well. His C2 is good. It's got some stuff, but weapon just giving you that extra EM scaling is really nice, and it's a very strong weapon overall. That's a pretty good increase for him. Wander, again, make sure you have your C6, and once you do have your C6, I would go for like C6 Farzan. I mean, once you do, I think his C2 is actually quite good. I think you can do C2 or weapon. The thing is, his weapon is actually like it's better to just get Risley's weapon if Risley happens to be on a good weapon banner, because it's actually just sort of a better weapon. Like his signature does have some use for single target, but it's much nicer to have the bonus for Risley as well. For Risley, I would recommend C1 or weapon. His weapon's a big increase, and like it gives him a good amount more power, but his C1 makes him more flexible to play, so you can go for either one. I would again tend towards his weapon over C1, but the C1 is decent. For Alhaitham, I want to put him in get Nahida C2 because that's going to help so much. I know Alhaitham mains are going to be mad at me. Getting his weapon is still really good. I don't go for his constellations. It's either weapon or Nahida C2. I think you guys want me to put him in weapon, but it's hard not to recommend Nahida C2 because any character that works with like even Nilou as well, you could really argue for Nahida C2, but it's tough. And then for Shan Yun, I would say her C1 because like you can go for the weapon, but the C1s are so good for overworld. So maybe we'll go C1 or weapon as well. Because to be fair, when in Abyss, like the C1 does nothing. So going for the weapon to increase plunge damage is going to be the way to go. Next is going to be Baiju. Baiju is a character that you really don't want to get constellations for. Like, don't get me wrong, I love Baiju. I think he's definitely one of my more used characters, but I think he pretty much does everything that he wants to do at C0, and his 5-star weapon doesn't really give him anything. Let's look at his constellations. Additional charge for your skill. That seems all right. A bit more healing, lower your energy need. When your active character hits a nearby opponent, more Dendro application. Both of them seem like all right. That doesn't help you do more damage, but it's a bit of quality of life. Like, reducing ER could be really nice. You can also probably increase your buff more if you have lowered ER needs. So I would probably say that if you're a Baiju main, then C1 is the way to go. But from a value perspective, it's definitely on the lower end. For Child's definitely a character that you're going to want to go for a weapon more than anything else. Like, his constellation one is nice for like quality of life stuff, but overall, the weapon is where it's at. Especially if you go for something like Aqua. Like, Polar Star is a very universal weapon, but you can also go for Aqua. You can also go for Thundering Pulse. You can even go for Linny's bow. Like, Child has some great 5-star bow options, and that's definitely the best place to get an upgrade for him. For Kokomi, this is tough. It's definitely not her weapon. I'm assuming that if you're going for constellations for Kokomi, it's because you really love Kokomi and you're going to be using her on field. For off field Kokomi, I realistically don't think that her constellations do much for you, but for on field Kokomi, she gets additional hydro and additional damage, and then for C2, she gets a healing bonus. I think C1 is where you stop for like a damage Kokomi. Like, you get some additional on field damage, and if you're running Farina, like, of course, you know, getting Farina cons is going to be better than getting Kokomi cons, but if you want to show your love and dedication for Kokomi specifically, I think C1 is where to go. But realistically, like, most of the characters, if they're played with Farina, they're going to go here. But this is also assuming maybe you don't have Farina, or maybe you want to just have a universal upgrade for Kokomi if she's your main, because that's sort of what we're kind of tunnel visioning on. For Navia, her C2 is a massive 36% crit rate buff, and her weapon, I really like her weapon for the versatility and looks it gives you. I think you could go for C1, sorry, for weapon or C2. Where did I put that? C1, C2 or weapon. Yeah, it's basically like either you go all the way and you get her C2, or you get a weapon. I would recommend the weapon, but the C2 does have objective value. If you're running with Farina and Marie-José, then that's less value, but I assume if you're that dedicated, you're probably, you know, getting her signature set for her, probably. I mean, maybe not, but you kind of want to use her without Farina as well. So yeah, I think C2 or weapon is the right call here. And then finally, the last character is Linny. I'm 99% sure that Linny belongs in the weapon category, but I do want to double check his constellations just to make sure. 2 Grim Malkid hats present at 1, more damage, lots of crit damage. I mean, his C2 is probably good. I think weapon is where you want to go. He has so much damage, even with just his weapon. Maybe it's weapon or C2 as well, because the C2 does give him quite a lot of stats. 3 stacks of 60% crit damage, because it does take him, it does have to spend time on field to get that. I think just sticking with the weapon is where it's at for Linny. So that is my tier list. What do you What do you guys think of this? This was pretty interesting. It's kind of, it turned out kind of differently than I expected. Hopefully you guys agree. Oh, I didn't show Shenyan on the side. Hopefully you guys agree with how I did it and not trying to rank how strong each one is. Because I personally just feel if you're going to go for constellations on a character, it should be because you love the character and want to max them, not because you want the strongest account possible. Because I feel like it's just so obvious if you want the strongest account possible. It's Farina C2, it's Nahida C2, and that's basically your 2 teams and you're done. I highly recommend playing and building and crushing the game with your favorite characters. That is what feels the best. If you want to see which characters I think are strongest overall, check out my tier list up there. And I'm working on a tier list where, like, what happens to this tier list if you add in these 5-star weapons